What the Pel is up, everybody? This is Pelicans Plus with Elliot Clough at Elliot Clough on Twitter. Hopefully, we don't have any streaming issues today like we did yesterday, but we are once again live and again hoping that we can make it through without any hiccups. So, this episode is brought to you by Hornitos. Hornitos, the official tequila of Pelicans Plus and Boot Crew Media. Make sure you subscribe or follow depending on where you are listening to this podcast. You leave that rate and review on Apple Podcasts, and you tell a friend about the pod, as well as subscribing and leaving that rate and, well, the subscribing and liking and commenting on YouTube. How about that? We got to figure it out eventually. Anyway, so going forward in today's pod, it's going to be a doozy, if we're being honest. There's a lot happening in the Pelicans world right now, and it kind of sucks. There's just a lot. There's a lot to deal with. There's a lot to take in, and we're going to try to break it down here on today's episode. So let's start off with the major news today that we don't have an update on Zion Williamson. Willie Green spoke to the media, and we were told nothing, and that we would be eventually told in a couple days by David Griffin. So whether or not you count that as, I don't know, being turned away or just Willie avoiding the question, I don't know. And Willie doesn't appear to be a coach to avoid a question unless directed to. So I don't know what to make of it. It's really annoying, I can tell you that. And as of right now, the other thing is Zion's not even running yet. He's doing dribbling work with Teaspoon at the practice facility, and that's it. And we were told by Griff and Zion that he'd be back by the first game a week from today against the Sixers. A week from today, as I'm recording this podcast. That is freaking crazy considering what we know right now, which is nothing. We know nothing other than the fact that he's only been doing dribbling work and hasn't been running yet. And that, as opposed to nothing, is just bad. It's bad. It's bad. There's just no way in hell he plays next week. I really don't believe it. He was gargantuan at media day. He wasn't gargantuan, rather, but he sure as hell wasn't Duke Zion either. I mean, he's not 400 pounds, right? He's not completely overweight, but he's not in shape. And if he's not running right now, then there's no way in blue hell he's going to be able to compete next week. I guarantee it. Not a chance. No way. I mean, we just, what the hell is going on, man? If he's being diligent with his recovery, if this has anything to do with Zion's family wanting to keep it quiet or whatever, we just don't know. This is shrouded in mystery. And that's not, I mean, it's 2019 all over again, man. How long did we have to wait? How long did we have to wait to see Zion Williamson? Over halfway through the season. I don't think that's going to happen this time around. I don't. I certainly hope not. I'm not sure how that's going to work out, but it makes me nervous as hell. And this team needs that type of dominance from a player like Zion Williamson in order to be impactful in the NBA this season. They just do. Whether or not Zion's being immature, whether or not Zion is just not being a professional and working hard to get back to where he once was is one thing, but it's frustrating as hell is what it is. I put it out on Twitter today and said, consider me annoyed, because this is just, and I mean, I don't know who you want to blame. I know friends over at Pro Pels Talk, Justin Napoli, got attacked on YouTube because of what he said about Zion and him probably being immature and lazy and stuff like that. And I don't know if that's the case surrounding Zion. I don't know him personally. I don't know the intricacies of what's going on in the facility, but this is just absolutely nuts. And it's been 2 weeks since we were told anything. And we still have to wait. 2 weeks and nothing's changed in terms of how much he's participating in practice. That's not a good sign. I don't like that at all. I can tell you that right now. I mean, and a lot can happen in 2 weeks in terms of rehab and his health, especially considering the timing of the injury. We were told he'd be back to play by the first game of the season. And if that were true 2 weeks ago, he'd be on the court, probably running about now. And Shamit Dua, who does excellent work for Bourbon Street Shots, had he subtweeted Zion today. And he said something to the effect of Jackson Hayes being diligent about his progress and getting back and healthy. And Zion's been hurt a few times, and he didn't come back and compete at the timetable that we were told. And it's starting, things are starting to add up. How much of this is David Griffin? How much of this is Zion Williamson? How much of it is the trading staff? Are we going to have to see those goddamn bursts again? Is that what we're going to have to deal with? This is... I just laughed because it's freaking laughable. Why is it like this? Why are we dealing with this right now? Supposedly the rest of the team is healthy. They're out there competing. B.I. and Jackson are going to be back for the opening game, as far as I know. And why does everything last so long with this dude? He's not even traveling with the team, man. Which is it's the preseason, big deal. But still, there is just so much vagueness around Zion and his health constantly with this franchise. Constantly. And it's getting to be too much. What are we not being told? And on top of that, you heard me refer to Griff, compare Griff to Stalin of all people, based on the amount of lies that we've heard coming out of the Pelicans organization and their franchise. And what are we being lied to about now? That's my expectation as to where we're at right now with the Pelicans and what we've been told over the last few years regarding Zion's health of the team, communication within the team, whether or not these guys get along or not necessarily the players, but the coaching staff and the players. It's just lies on lies on lies. This Zion, the piano thing was true. The Zion coming back on the 20th was false. So, this is just, it's constant. Whether that's coming from Griff and just wanting to control the narrative around his team, is it everybody? Does it permeate throughout the franchise? Because all this does, and it's like I said, it's been 3 seasons, and all this does is gets us to a point where we're at now, where I'm at now, where I'm saying this is probably a lie. Next thing we're told about Zion's health, probably a lie. What are we going to be told next? Where are we going to be led astray next? Is David Griffin going to try to weave a banner of all of these things that he's doing? Is he writing a page, a book of a page, one letter at a time? What's happening? How can the fan base trust the guy who runs the whole thing? It's too much. I don't want to put this on Willie Green. I think Willie Green was put in a tough situation. I think Willie's a really, really good person, and I think he's really going to be really, really good at his job as the coach of the New Orleans Pelicans. But this is, man, it's really frustrating, to say it for the 40th time. It's really frustrating, and it's not fair. It's not fair to the fan base. It's not fair to the players. It's not fair to Willie. It's not going to work. It's not going to make this team successful. Lies on lies on lies, and inefficient leadership did not get you anywhere. It's 1 step forward, 10 steps back. That's what it is. And if it's that on top of Zion not being healthy or Zion not putting in the work to get back, put it on Zion too. I've seen people calling the Pelicans fan base toxic because they're angry with Zion. But if he's not working to get back, if he's not putting in the rehab time to get back and healthy with his teammates, then what do you want? Do you want him to just be like, okay, you don't have to play? How does that make sense to anybody? It doesn't make sense to me at all. And if you agree, if you disagree, drop it on the comments wherever you're listening, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, etc. I want to hear what you have to say on the topic, because, like I said, people were people were attacking Justin for saying essentially what I'm saying right now. And if you're on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, drop a comment. Let me know what you're thinking, because this is just awful. It's just awful, and it's annoying. And for a city that deserves winning in New Orleans, it's not fair for them to be misled and treated this way. So that's how I feel about the whole Zion situation. It's just nuts. It's just nuts. And if he wants to buy in, and if he wants to be healthy, and if he wants to compete and play defense, he will. He will. Zion will, if he wants to do that, because he can. And I mean, look at the dude is capable of just so many different things on the basketball court. And if he wants it, he will do it. We'll find out if he wants it. Again, drop a comment, drop a like. Let us know how you're feeling about the whole Zion situation, and what you think about how it's being handled, how Zion's conducting himself, etc. Now, I mentioned, you could say big deal. It's the preseason. Well, the season is almost upon us. In a week from today, as I'm recording this podcast, the Pelicans start their regular season against the Philadelphia 76ers, where Ben Simmons will actually maybe be playing for the team. And so we'll see how that goes. But in referring to the preseason, everyone and their mother is down on the Pelicans right now after they got blown out by the Bulls and by the Jazz. And you know what? Like be down on them. Fine, go for it. You're not no skin off my nose. Like the Bulls game was ugly. I didn't even really watch the Jazz game because I had other stuff going on, and it was the preseason. But this is not the point in the year where I get worried. It's not. I am not in any sort of position a year from the actual game starting to be concerned or to be upset about the on-court product. There are things to pay attention to. There are, little idiosyncrasies, not necessarily that, but where the chemistry is going with these new guys, how the young guys are developing, the main thing is whether or not guys have smiles on their faces, and they're enjoying each other. And I can tell you right now, they're enjoying each other way more than they ever did with Stan Van Gundy. I can tell you that right now. One game where they won, and they were all celebrating and having fun and high-fiving each other and doing the jump up shoulder bump thing. That never happened last year, unless they were beating a team like the Sixers or the Bucks. The screaming for each other, the being excited for one another, that is new. And that is what excited me about Willie Green. Because, I'm not going to say that I'm not concerned about the losses and the negatives and then get so excited about the game against the Magic. What made me excited during that game against the Magic was the fact that these guys liked each other and that they were having fun. That's the Willie Green era that I was speaking of. That's what made me excited. The enjoyment of the game of basketball had returned with this team. Sure, that comes along with success, and this team is going to ebb and flow as they do. First of all, because they're young. Second of all, because it's a long freaking season, 82 games. And the last thing I'm going to do is paint the picture of the Pelican season 4 games into the preseason. Last thing I'm going to do. I will not do that. The Pelicans won a ton of games over the last 3 years of games that didn't matter. They were really good at that. And where did it get them? Absolutely freaking nowhere. The preseason is not the time to get down in the dumps. It's not the time to make an evaluation of what the season's going to be like. It's just not. There's no need to get in anybody's feels about where the Pelicans are right now, depending on how they played these last 4 games. It's just not necessary. And I mean, in these games, they didn't have 3 of the 4 games. They didn't have Brandon Ingram. 0 of the games did they have Zion. And Jackson Hayes only played 2 games, 1.5, I think. there's still plenty of time for these guys to get used to one another. How does that happen? That's the question. How do they get used to one another? How do they build that chemistry? Time and patience. Patience mostly by the fan base, because you cannot evaluate the season. I mean, even 10 games into the regular season, 20 games into the regular season, the record that everybody likes to reference when they're saying, don't freak out early on in the season is the Miami Heat when they went 9-8 and had 3 Hall of Famers on their roster and arguably the GOAT and another guy in D Wade, who was my favorite player. I have a poster of him over there, like I did on the wall at my last place. And that's for good reason. There is no logical moment in time where somebody says, okay, we're however many games in, and okay, that's it. Like in an 82 game season, it's not going to happen. With the level of new faces, you got Devontae, you got JV, you got Sato, you got Temple, you got the 2 draft guys, Trey and Herb, and then the 2 two-way guys in Dalton Hummus. I really hope I'm pronouncing his name right. I think that's how it's pronounced. Hummus and Jose Alvarado, the kid from Georgia Tech. And so that, all the new faces, 1, the new system, 2, basically, 3 integral parts of the coaching staff who are new in D'Antoni, Jerron Collins, and Willie Green. And there's a lot of things to figure out. There's a lot of time to figure it out. And there's really smart vets on this roster that can help that along in Jonas Valanciunas, Devontae, Sato, and Garrett Temple. And while Garrett Temple, the product on the court is not good so far, it's not good at all. Having him around certainly helps. And, there are things that you can be concerned about in the preseason. Well, 1, Temple, because it's looking like he's the new Eric Bledsoe on the court. It's not that he doesn't care. It's not that he won't provide leadership, because this dude, oh my gosh, I love Garrett Temple off the court. On it, not so much. Anyway, in terms of the things that concern me, the other one was just turnovers, and that's going to minimize as these guys get to know each other. That's just it. The turnovers aren't good. There was a lot of them, 4 of them by Garrett Temple. Again, I highly doubt he's in the starting lineup this next week. I don't really know why Willie did that. What I'm thinking is Willie was hoping that it'd be like a stabilizer to the young guys, but it was kind of the opposite. So I'm hoping it's not Trey, Jonas, Devontae, and BI as the starting lineup, and we see little to none of Garrett Temple. Again, if you're feeling the same way, if you're thinking something different, how do you feel about the preseason? Drop a comment there on YouTube, on Facebook. And before we transition to the final topic of today's episode, there is one comment that I want to address from Jose David Gomez. I'm going to read it out loud and put it up on the screen. A good question for Zion would be the 8 to 10 weeks between your surgery and the beginning of training camp. What did you do to be more ready to come back early? By the sounds of it, Jose, I don't think anything. I don't think he did a damn thing. He'd be skinnier. He'd be more inclined to be back to play, man. And sorry, that's the sound of frustration is not aimed at you, Jose. It's frustration with Zion, and the dude says he loves ball. The dude says he's a historian of the game. He loved playing in Madison Square Garden. He loved playing with these guys. He praised essentially all of his teammates last season at different points in time, and says he wants to get the playoffs. And if this is true, your actions would line up. That's what would happen. And I want to believe Zion. I want to believe he's doing everything he can to get back. I want to believe that he'll be, ready to go at least early in the season. Maybe not right away. Not right away. Because it's just not happening with the status of his body right now. But sooner rather than later. If it were truly the case that he wanted to be back, he'd have the opportunity to be back, and he'd probably be running right now. That's where I'm at with that. I just don't believe it based on what we've seen. One thing that I like to do with the way I approach my life is there's a lot of different things, but one of the main things when it comes to this certain topic is you act out what you believe. And Zion is not acting out what he supposedly believes about himself, about the game of basketball, I suppose, and how much he loves the game. So that's how I feel about that. Thanks for the comment, Jose, and for those of you who have any thoughts on what I'm saying, if you agree, disagree, let me know. I'd love to hear it. And now we can finally address what you're all here for. That thing going across the bottom of the screen there, if you're watching on YouTube and Facebook. Now that Wenyen Gabriel is gone, who should I stand? Because I had a moment of silence for Wenyen being waived. I was only slightly heartbroken. I didn't emotionally attack my timeline on Twitter or anything like that. I had a few people respond and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, Elliot," and stuff like that. And I guarantee a lot of people were immediately thinking about me in that circumstance because of how much I love Wenyen Gabriel and how much I was rooting for him to get playing time last year. And I appreciate it. I just want everybody to know that reached out. I thought it was funny and I appreciated it. And I didn't really expect Wenyen to make it past that cut. I thought he was going to get waived given that he's on a non-guaranteed contract and the roster already had 15 other guys who would contribute on a lot of other teams. And Wenyen's erratic and his shot selection isn't great at times. He had the turnover against the T-Wolves. I didn't necessarily think he was going to be back. And I don't think it's the end of the world in terms of their roster either. This was kind of a playful thing, but also I liked Wenyen, and I thought he should have gotten a lot more time last year than he did, especially when Nicolo Melli was playing a lot of games. The Italian who only spent 2 years in the league didn't do a whole lot of good for the Pels, and I thought Wenyen could have provided a lot of help, especially defense on the wing and even shooting. He was better than Melli. So that's where I'm at with that. It sucks. Like, it was really fun to stan Wenyen and to mention him on radio shows and stuff like that. But he is gone. So along with, I think, Malcolm Hill, and let me see if I can find it here. Malcolm Hill and James Banks, who are on Exhibit 10 contracts, they are no longer with the Pelicans. So now the question remains, who should I unapologetically stand for this Pelicans team? And it's got to be a lower tier player. I'm not going to just unapologetically stand BI or anything like that, because that's too basic. I got to have a niche in Pels Twitter, And I'm thinking, well, first of all, a lot of people brought up Herb Jones, and I love it. I there's a lot about Herb Jones that I really, really like. I am so excited. I didn't really know a lot about the guy when he was coming out of the draft, but I love the pick now. I mean, from what we've seen from him, from what I've been told about him, I'm very high on Herb Jones. And he wasn't my first thought because I kind of think he's going to get regular minutes this year. I mean, look at the roster and look at what he's done. I mean, I'd be pretty surprised if Josh Hart sticks around long term just because of the way his contract is structured. And I mean, Trey has been awesome so far, but Trey has been awesome so far, and he's going to get a bunch of minutes. And so, I mean, I'm going to look at the roster here just to see where we're at in terms of depth and everything like that, just to make sure. Because believe it or not, I don't have the roster completely memorized off the top of my head. If you asked me to, I could do that. But I really think Herb's going to get minutes over, obviously, Didi, Kyra, Garrett Temple, and Zion's hurt. Other people are going to get hurt throughout the season. That's just a fact. Can't really do anything about that. It's just going to happen. And I really think Herb is going to get a lot of minutes this year. So he wasn't my first choice. If it's a situation where he's getting DNPs, then I could lean that way. I might do an evaluatory period to determine who I'm going to unapologetically stand. And that's a mouthful, so I'm going to probably stop saying that. So Herb is the consensus on Twitter from what I've received Also, Lyle Swithenbank, who I mentioned on the last podcast from Hoopball Pels. Check it out, my favorite Australian. He said Jose Alvarado, which was another initial thought of mine. And I love Jose Alvarado. This dude is a perimeter menace. He is a very poor man's Drew Holiday. And I say very poor man's because there are only so many Drew Holidays in the world. And Jose is like the miniature version of that. He's a little bit smaller, kind of a menace on the outside, and just kind of like, he's like Michael Scott, but like in the basketball episode of The Office, but like actually good, because the one thing I thought of when I went like that was when Michael jumped up on some player from the warehouse and went like this, but then got beat. So Jose is just he's taller than me, little comparatively in the rest of the NBA, but little ball of energy. And one thing that one of my old cross country coaches used to call one of the smaller girls who was pretty good, he called her Mighty Might. So that's kind of what I think of with Jose. And as a guy who's average height, but a little bit skinnier than the average population, probably, I kind of relate to that of just being tenacious and nasty on the court. Kind of like a Najee Marshall, who earned time because of how good he was last year as a two-way player. So Jose could very well be my pick. I'm a big fan of Jose. It's much easier to stand guys who you could see actually getting minutes at some point, though. And so my actual choice is probably not going to get minutes. So this was my initial choice just because it's the body type and the type of player that I tend to lead towards more in circumstances like this. And it's Dalton Thomas. And I am a big fan right now. He is the leading player for the Elliott Stan, I suppose. And it's mostly because of his story. I don't know if any of you have heard what Dalton went through in high school and college, but Dalton's been through hell and back in terms of his basketball career. And it's been with injuries and a lot of that. And that's another thing I can relate to. So I gravitate towards Dalton in this particular circumstance. And again, I say lower tier. So it's got to be guys who are going to be getting DNPs. Billy Hernangomez was thrown out there, and I y'all know I love Billy. So we'll see about that too. But anyway, in terms of Dalton, he tore his ACL in summer ball as a junior and then tore it again his senior year. He was getting recruited by some smaller schools and reached out and was trying to go D1, and he probably would have gone D1 if he wouldn't have tore the same ACL twice. So he just went through hell and went to Western Washington as a freshman, and then ultimately transferred to another D2 school in California, I believe. I'm going to make sure I get this right, but dominated at the D2 level. Point Loma I believe it's in California. But the guy Point Loma, Nazarene, and San Diego. That's where he competed. He really fought through some stuff as a basketball player, continued to compete, and ultimately won D2 National Player of the Year, won a national title, and had some incredible moments throughout his career with some crazy dunks and stuff like that. And after his dunk against the Chicago Bulls the other night, that's an easy choice. That was nasty. Chris Connor tweeted it out. If you missed it, you can find it on his Twitter page if you scroll down a bit. The other thing about Dalton is he's kind of a sharpshooter. I think I saw he shot 47% from three his senior year at Point Loma. So big fan of that. He's also bounced around the league. He's really an underdog story, and if he can get a spot on this roster as a shooter and continue to develop, I mean, he's 25, but we'll see what happens, and I'll be rooting for him. If he's my stan, we will see. I'm going to take a 2-week period at the beginning of the season to determine what the plan is there, but I'll keep you posted because I know everybody's so invested. One question before we get out of here from Jamal Amiri Hamed. If Zion can't go, who do you think should start? Jamal, good question. I hit it. You might have not been on the feed yet. Probably Trey. The way I see it right now, it's gonna be Devontae, Bi, Trey, and JV. That's what I see. The second unit would probably struggle in a situation that is the starting lineup. It's just something you got to figure out. And obviously, Willie's been trying to figure that out. The guaranteed starters are more than likely going to be JV and Bi. Other than that, it's kind of up in the air. I think Nah should be in that group too. Maybe you bring Devontae off the bench. Who do you start at your 4? Is Garrett Temple really going to start? Because good God. I don't know what the hell Willie was doing. It was bad. It was really bad. So we'll see how that shakes out. Anyway, once again, this is Pelicans Plus. For those of you who are listening on YouTube, Facebook, make sure you subscribe, follow, like us, drop a comment. Let me know what you're thinking of this episode, your thoughts on the topics. Who should I stan? I want to know and hear from people who aren't on Pel's Twitter, because Pel's Twitter, I love you. I love you. There's just some nut bags on there. There just is. You're going to find that on Twitter everywhere. But also, make sure you leave a rate and review on Apple Podcasts. That really does truly help us out. We can use that. It helps with exposure. So please help us out with that. Just scroll to the bottom on your feed for Pelicans Plus, and you can leave a rate, which is preferably 5 stars, and then type a review there at the bottom as well. What you're thinking of the pod, what you think of the Pelicans, stuff like that. So make sure to do that. Once again, this podcast presented by Hornitos and Boot Crew Media. Hornitos, the official tequila of Pelicans Plus and Boot Crew Media. And with that, folks, once again, I am Elliot Clough at Elliot Clough on Twitter, and this was Pelicans Plus.